Alright, we're continuing as Poland here. Or Slavia. Slavic Union. Slavic Union. Alright. Oh. I wonder if Japan's ever gonna come for me. They probably are. But I just want to bust down the Axis really fast. That's very important. That's so annoying that he joined the Allies. Means I have to fight the Allies. The Allies took Africa, that's hilarious. Alright, I want to get like one more army out, and we'll garrison this with it. We'll do this right now. Actually, this needs to be reinforced. Okay. I want to like just reinforce this whole area. Honestly. I mean, we need... What? Alright, we'll just let them go. Polski. I mean, there's no reason to go to war immediately because we're on total mob. So, I mean, he's got more civvies, but we've got way more millies. At least. I mean, not really. But we're going to. Okay, he's pulling off my border. Could attack and conquer that immediately. That looks nice. I feel good about that now. What? Split in half. More. I don't think Germany's ready for the storm that is about to break upon them. Wow. Can I put in like an engineer? Nope. Need more support. Let's not use that. That's retarded. Let's use 9 cavalrymen. Alright, well. There you go. Oh. Do we not have cores in all of this? Could have sworn that we did. We do. Rockets. Raketenwaffen. Yeah, and I guess when we go to war, we will... I mean, I don't think he's going to have any way to go to war with me. Because, like, he doesn't have any claims. Oh, he does. Lol. Vladivostok Independent Republic. Well, we'll have to make this quick then. Great. So what are our infantry are pretty good. Put anti-tank in them? Man. Yeah, work on that. We have to get our Air Force up too. I haven't even checked, but I'm guessing it's almost. How many does Germany have on fighters or planes? Less than us. Way less than us. And we have our doctrine totally done, but he probably does too. Oh. Well, better than nothing. Put that there. We'll just do like this. Put him in Western Poland. And we don't need to do that yet, but we will. Like 50 close air support left. And double. Alright. All we need now is to garrison the coast. And get these guys out. Ugh, we need better light tanks. For our light tank support units. What does this even do? It just buffs our military commanders. Alright, let's buff these guys. Ow. I mean, we're pretty much really good. We'll see how we do against Germany, but I'm predicting good things. Forgot about this. Infantry offensive. Bonsai charge. Backhand blow. They use the backhand blow. Bonsai charge. Sounds pretty good for Poland. And you. Overwhelming fire. Blitz, masterful blitz. I believe. Should we put like... Oh yeah, we really should put one more army there. We just have to declare before 43. Britain, what are you doing? Oh yeah, there you go. Churchill. What is the US? Is he in? Yeah. Ah, that means we're gonna have to fight the US. That's okay, I guess. For fucking Yugoslavia. That's pretty silly, but we will do it. Well, then make more trucks, goddammit. No wonder we ain't got enough. Oh, look at that. We actually got some fucking anti-tank. Let's use our air experience to make better fucking fighters. Boom. Ah, and we got the fucking sign company. That's amazing. Well, those planes are gonna kick ass. Ooh, new guns. Yeah, like that's dangerous. But we are totally reinforced down here. No naval invasions, please. You can do coastline too, I guess, but fulfill your destiny. You can do the fucking. You can do this too. I mean, they might naval invade down there actually, but I don't care. Alright. I think I'm about ready to declare. The German-American War. That's good. But not as good as us. For Poland. Let's see. Any more planes? Alright, it's now or never. I mean, I'd like to encircle him. Let's get some music. Let's go! Bum ba dum, bum ba dum, bum ba dum. Bum 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 ba dum. Bum 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 ba dum. Bum 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 ba dum. Bum 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 ba-dum. Bum 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 ba-dum. Scum. Bum 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 ba-dum bum ba-dum. Dee 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 doo doo doo. I'll last stand him if I have to. And I will. Send some cast too, maybe. Dun 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 dun. You're retarded, bro. What are you doing? Fine, I guess. Not one step back. Cut this rail line. We will find victory. Wow. This is pretty easy. Sexy boobs. Alright. Look at this. That's bullshit. You're not pushing that. We all know he's not pushing that, so. It's a fucking mountain. I'm not taking that in 4 days. I mean, even if he does, who cares? We just completely destroyed him up here. Rush for Königsberg, baby. Bum ba-dum. Bum ba-dum bum 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 bum. I don't actually know this song, so. Huh! Dude, you're getting wrecked, Germany. Yeah, he actually is going to take that, probably. Oh, we're getting busted. Somehow. Take that airport, we'll change it. Slavs, you will save your motherland. Rise up. Stop the fascist menace. Boom. I love it. It's a little bit better. Look at that. Green bubbles. This guy needs to really fuck off. Whatever, we'll stop it when we fucking rush him. Take back Gdynia. Anastasia's like, yep, it's all part of the plan. This is fucked. Eastern. Yeah, that's okay. I mean, whatever. If we get pushed out in some of these places, it's not really the end of the world. Alright, the best defensive is an offensive. Or something. Don't even look at the areas where we're losing. That's my strategy. Get balked. Holy shit. Take back Gdynia. I'd like to take back Slovakia. We'll get it back, but that's my cores, man. What's up with all the people getting clustered? Alright. Oh, it's me. Okay. Axe killer? Yo.
What makes a murderer's mind
Shut up.
in the late 90s first started to really
Alright.
resent him.
Well, if we lose
They were
this,
mean and stopped talking or
I mean, I don't want him to
interacting
make a
with him in any way
breakthrough.
because they thought he had become presumptuous and arrogant. My mum was
We
the
could
only one
take
who
some
still
units
talked to
down
him,
here.
so he started to resent her for changing him and started to drink a lot to dull his brain. He got drunk every day and hoping he would get back to where he was and would be accepted by everyone again, but of course
There you
that's
go.
not how it works. Now, when I turned 4, my mum told him that we were going back to the city so I could attend a good school, and we'd probably be back only once in a while. And at that, he completely
I can't believe we're
snapped.
taking Danzig. Let's go.
Not only did she give him a poisonous gift that was ruining his life, she was leaving him all alone with absolutely no one else to talk to. That day, he left screaming.
Alright. Let's get
A
here
few hours
quicker.
later, his car crashed into our garden. I remember my mum being very calm and telling me to go hide under her bed upstairs. I
Stop.
rushed upstairs
Can't
and
push.
through the window, and
Let
I
him
saw him
reinforce.
coming out of his car with
You
difficulty.
can push there though, so.
He was mildly hurt by the crash, but mostly super drunk and angry. My mum was walking towards him when he began swinging out with a huge axe, and she came running inside. She locked the door immediately and called the police.
He abandoned this,
He
pretty
started
much.
yelling that he was going to kill us and destroyed our car with his axe. And when he was done, he started destroying the door as well. He came in, climbed up the stairs, and used the axe to destroy the bedroom door. Thankfully, the police arrived just before he managed to get through, and they arrested him. And unfortunately,
This is
he
bullshit.
died a few days later. I think it was because of liver failure or something like that. I honestly
Defend
don't
your
know
fucking
if
homeland,
he would
Hitler.
actually followed through with his threats, and I don't know if he loved my mum or if it was just really because he was upset. Now that's all a big mystery. I am still very scared
Could
every
we?
time I think about it, though. And axes
Yes.
is still terrifying.
Yes, we could.
But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this crazy little story, and thanks. for
What even
listening.
was that story? That story sucked. Okay.
So this happened maybe about 2 years ago
Equipment.
now, while riding quads with my boyfriend.
I just bypass this.
Yeah, it wasn't too late at night, maybe around 10 p.m. I would guess. But we were camping out at our campground where we have a small trailer surrounded by other camps. In the summer, it's full of
We
kids.
want
running
division
around
attack
and
on core
adults
territory,
golf
actually.
carts and stuff. But it was late December, and we're one of the few people who go up in the winter, since it gets pretty cold here and they shut the water off.
Okay.
The woods are a decent bit away from the actual campground. It gets pretty quiet
Nice.
out there. But something about the snow just makes everything quieter as well, I guess.
Probably not a good idea to just.
I've always felt
use that.
slightly uncomfortable in the woods at night. My boyfriend told me that I
Boom,
was
baby.
just a paranoid person, and I chalked it up to me reading too much creepypastas as a kid. I always felt somewhat safer since we were on a quad, and we can go pretty fast if needed.
I can't believe
So
the
we
Allies
were
are so
in the
incompetent.
middle of the night, enjoying a cold ride, drifting in the snow.
Can't even give me a
when
D-Day.
All of a sudden, we come to a stop.
I mean,
That's
not that
when
I need it, but
just got this really eerie feeling, and I asked him why he stopped, and it was something along the lines of with his gloves or
Ooh.
something. The quad came off, and He turned the quad off and bent over messing with something. I start looking behind and around me because I'm just someone who's super aware of their surroundings. I look to my left and I see a brown skinny tree that always freaks me out because I mistake it as something else. Then I look to the right of the scary
Best
tree
to keep
and
pressure on
see
him, I
something
think.
even taller and pale looking. I immediately avert my attention from it being totally freaked out. I find the courage to look back, and this time, it seems closer. This time, I didn't have my glasses on, and I was just saying it's another tree that looks like a person, and I'm fine. But before I could
retreat
say
out of
anything
there.
to my boyfriend, he had finished whatever he was doing, and
Really?
he took off.
How
I
are we
buried
taking
my face
attrition
into
here?
the back of his jacket, too afraid to see anything else, and still having that feeling of being watched over me.
Get out of there.
Ask if we can go back to the camp.
Y'all
He
motherfuckers are
agreed
crazy.
since it was so cold.
Cut that railroad.
I decided not to say anything to him since he'd want to go back and investigate or straight up not believe me and write me off as paranoid again. And I
Just take
did
it.
not want to go back there at all. I figured the following day we would go back into the woods during the daytime and I would see that there was another tree there that I never noticed before. But when we went back through and there was nothing next to the brown tree, that was when my stomach dropped.
Boom. Come on, you know that's fucking
also when I told
superiority,
him
man.
I saw something last night. He told me that I should have told him, which he was right. I probably should have said something, but I was just too scared and just kept it to myself. We still go up
Way
there
more enemy
occasionally.
fighters.
Not as much due to our jobs now, but thankfully I've
Do
never
not attack.
experienced anything else.
Do not attack if you're losing, please. That should be pretty obvious.
So, I'm going to start with the creepy but the natural. I've been a hunter since I was probably 13, maybe earlier. I don't really remember.
got
but
Breslau.
being out in the woods since I was very young means that I get to see or hear things that I normally wouldn't while living in
Fuck
the
you.
cities. I've had a few different instances where I've been very creeped out in the woods, and so I'd like to cover a few of them, and the last story is the one that you guys will probably like to hear. So in my state, you've got a handful of primary predators out in the
Come
woods.
on. There you go.
Bears, wolves, cougars.
Got
But
'em.
I'll start with a funny one that will butter you up a bit. The guy who owns the land that
What
we
is
hunt
this
on,
bullshit?
He decided that it was going to be a good idea to store some of his equipment on
You
his
guys are
land,
retarded. Holy
one of which was
fuck.
a styrofoam
Just letting him
float.
fucking break through.
One year we go out there to go and check on that stuff, to go pick it up, and that
What's
big
this?
piece of styrofoam had met its demise to a black bear. And you can tell that the bear had a heck of a lot of fun tearing up that styrofoam because there are just clouds of it everywhere. And it had been throwing pieces of styrofoam all around. Like a bomb
48
went off.
divisions.
I hope that the bear was
like
okay,
30.
but he didn't eat any of it, I don't think, and we did manage to get it cleaned up eventually. On another occasion, I was actually stalked by a cougar a few years back. When we had a deer opener, I like walking the road occasionally, and one of the first things that I noticed that year, which I wish I would have taken a picture of, was a set of tracks, really
Hitler, you
big cat
bastard.
tracks. This cat was obviously stalking other animals in the area, but me being me, I decided that I shouldn't be scared of it, that it would probably be more scared of me, but sure enough, I must have jinxed myself. I attempted to do a deer push by going through some of the really thick brush to try and scare up a deer or two and get it to move towards the other hunters in the
3,000
garden.
fighters.
I'm moving through the woods and I can hear something moving behind me, and every time I would stop, that noise would stop too. Eventually I got so unnerved, especially with the forest getting quiet, that I decided that if I'm going to get attacked by something,
Seems
that
like bullshit
I'd
to
rather
me.
be facing it. So I turned around and I walked straight back the way that I came with my rifle raised. When I began retreating back to where I'd come from, directly towards whatever it was making the following noises, I saw a tan flash of fur and a long tail pretty low to the ground turn around and run
I
away.
cannot
from me.
believe how incompetent this defense is. Like,
Today, as I was doing a walk up the main road with my
it's
rifle,
retarded. The
I was
Romanian
close
breakthrough.
to the tree line on the side of the road when I heard a deep growl immediately to my right. I turned with my rifle up to see the face of a cougar at my
Yeah.
stomach level.
Especially because
because
he's
it was
he
raised up
fucking just
on and
lost
out
down
of
to
the
the
brush.
goddamn
I calmly
odor
backed
in
away
his own
and walked
country,
back up the road
and he's
that I'd
fucking
come
punching
from
me
and
through in goddamn
apologized for
Romania.
disturbing him. Now, though,
Get
for
out!
the wolves.
Leave if you're gonna get encircled, you
A
fucking
few years
tard!
back, my dad shot a deer and well, we gutted it. If anyone here is familiar with the field dressing of an animal, then you typically leave the gut pile just out of the woods.
Oh my god.
This was like the year that we found out that there was a wolf pack that moved up on the property. So my dad leaves a gut pile.
Stop
100 yards
leaving
from the
tiles
stand.
open, AI.
The day after,
Goofy
I was
fucking
sitting in my dad's
bastard.
stand while he was doing a
That would
bit of
suck
moving
if we
the
lost
property
that.
to try and scare deer towards me.
That would suck bad.
As he was getting close to me, which I didn't know at that time, I was sitting in the stand and I heard a wolf kind of yelp or
How are you
howl
even able
from
to
the
do
gut
that?
pile.
It's a fucking mountain.
I texted my dad
No,
and
it's
told
not.
him that he better
Oh,
hurry
whatever.
up and get back because there was a wolf pack somewhere between us.
Take that.
Sure enough,
Please.
by the time that he'd made it back to me, he told me that he'd also heard the same thing and it was within probably 100 yards of
What do you mean?
This year, just in November, I actually took pictures of some old tracks.
Like
on
1,000
trails next to the
casts
size
just don't
13
even matter.
woods. The tracks are huge, and I know there's one set of 4 that were walking together. The picture that I took are the biggest tracks, though, and I'd have to ask them if that wolf is probably like 200 pounds.
Holy fuck. What is this?
Now for the one that sticks with me. So somewhere
Stop
around
attacking with
2006
forced
or
defense, please.
2007, I was a late teen. I was at my grandparents' cabin with them and my cousin. This was the summer in northwestern Wisconsin, Danbury to be specific.
I'm hitting
And
H
the
pretty hard
incident
if you can't
happened
tell.
midday when the sun was high in the sky and it was pretty warm out. So my cousin and I decided that we would play some airsoft, and I was wearing some camouflage and decided that I would have a better chance of not being
Gimme.
seen and being able to ambush him by going into the woods, which was about an acre attached to where the cabin
Bigger guns.
Well, what I mean is
More
that it's
guns.
miles of woods, but the acre is what my grandparents owned. We usually just stayed on the land that they owned, and it
Better
had sort of
guns.
cut trails into it, a big circle with one entrance. It sort of split into a Y and loops back around. And this is what we
This
used as
sucks.
a short ATV trail.
What are you guys doing?
As we were battling with the airsoft guns, we continued all the way up into the trail about halfway. We were both sort of winded and at the top of the hill next to a clearing in the woods when I decided to mess with my cousin and shush him and tell him that we were being watched. Now, mind you, I intended this as a joke, but when we both got quiet, I realized the woods were
Really?
dead quiet. Like, you could hear a pin drop quiet. Really, I could only hear my own breathing. And
There you go.
immediately felt like we were actually being
Not even
watched.
fucking taking that. Did we lose this airport?
So I
No?
sort of
Wow.
looked in the direction
Awesome.
of where I felt this was coming from, and I scanned the edge of the clearing, which on the other side of the clearing
Why
there's
does it
another
say-
hill that goes
Oh,
down to
I'm
a
getting hit
watering
with a
hole
railway
or
gun.
pond.
That's
So
pretty
we
funny.
would often see animals at the edge of that clearing. They usually would just run off like deer and whatnot, but anyway, I scanned from the left to the right and then back, and halfway on the right to the left visual scan, I saw
we're punching into
white,
fucking
and
our
I
cores.
sort of
Fuck you.
focused on it. And that's when it came into focus. The white that I saw were actually teeth. Teeth in the mouth of what looked like a wolf
man.
panting. Except this wolf was extremely tall for a wolf.
Kind of
Like,
wish
to
I
my
had air
stomach and my
superiority.
chest, and I'm 6'4". As I was taking in the
5,000.
details, I began to realize that this thing
Yeah, we just
was
don't have enough men down here, I
staring
guess.
at us.
You're
Maybe
getting butt
even more
fucked.
at my cousin to my left, and I also realized that this wolf was not on all fours, but crouching on its back legs, leaning against a tree, with its arms wrapped around the tree. Yeah, that's right. I said arm. This thing had like arms with hands, just like us, except it had long nails or claws as its fingertips. In the short time that I looked, I tried to absorb as
Guess I'm
much
glad I put the
information as
anti-air in,
could.
eh?
I said to my cousin, we have to go.
Nope.
My cousin took off like a bat out of hell. Being a baseball player, he was faster than me, and he ran, and I looked back at the creature, and it just locked on with laser focus onto my cousin, and stood all the way up and began to run towards us, which is
Fuck you.
exactly
You're
the point
holding
when I
this?
turned and ran also.
Goddamn cunt.
What I remember from when it stood up was that
That's
it was
bullshit.
significantly taller than I was.
No
But
way.
when completely upright, it was huge, and when I ran, I could hear it crashing through the woods behind me. When I reached the
At least
wide
we got more
trail,
mills than
my
him
cousin
now,
was
but
standing there waiting for me, and I told him to just
he
go.
is
And
busting
we ran
through
into
down
the
here.
parking area by the shed and stopped and talked about it because it
Yeah, he's
sounded
just
like
fucking
it
me
stopped
in
chasing
Romania.
us. At some point, we both agreed to not tell our grandparents what we saw, but we both agreed that essentially it looked like a werewolf. We also thought that
No more retreat,
it was probably
please.
not a good idea to go back, and we agreed that we would refer to it as a bear from now on. Unfortunately, my cousin never actually
we'll
got
stop
a
the
really good
retreat.
look at it, other than a bit of a flash of
Gotta get
reddish
more
brown
guns.
fur. But then again, maybe he's the lucky one because I still think about it from time to time.
Stop.
Especially when I'm out enjoying the great
Stop.
outdoors.
Holy shit.
Also, even afterward, I always just had a bad feeling there, especially at night by the campfire. I just always
How are
felt
you not
like
holding
there was
this? He doesn't
something
even have
on
any
top of the
supplies.
hill in the tree line watching us. One of the things that is good to remember too when you're out in the woods is that
Fuck it, man.
if the woods do go quiet, like eerily quiet, this sometimes means that there's likely a big predator in the area, and if you get a gut feeling, then you should follow it. Gut feelings are instincts, and we have them for a reason. And my instincts told me that I had to react immediately because
I mean, like, he's
if
even
I'd
pushing up in the
frozen,
north, which is the
I
biggest
think
thing.
I wouldn't be here. What makes a murderer's mind tick? Killer
Under
Psyche is a
green
true crime
air.
podcast from Wondery
Look at that
that
bullshit.
explores these types of questions about the crimes
Yeah,
that
we did lose
killers
that
and
down there.
criminals commit. Killer Psyche covers
I don't know what I was
high-profile
fucking talking
cases
about. We
that have
totally
shocked
lost
the
that.
world. Host Candice DeLong uses her 5 decades of experience as a clinical psychiatric nurse and FBI criminal profiler to dissect the motivations and behaviors of the most terrifying felons in history. You'll definitely want to listen to a recent episode of Killer Psyche where Candice explores the case of Pedro Rodriguez Filho, also known as Killer Petey or the Brazilian Dexter.
Get
At
'em.
age 14, Rodriguez murdered the deputy mayor in his town, all because the mayor had fired his father. Rodriguez went on to murder, by his count, more than 100 people, most of them while he was behind bars. To many, he was a hero, a vigilante seeking justice for victims. But to others, he was just a cold-blooded murderer. One of the highlights of the show for me was just how knowledgeable Candice is regarding all of the peripheral details to a case. It was fascinating to gain
Shut
insight.
up. Fucking putting ads.
I have no
Middle
idea what's
of
going
the
on
video.
in this place, but
That's bullshit.
I might actually try to record tonight what's going on. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to do that or not, though, but I'll try and ask and see if I can post it here.
Who cares about India?
Anyway,
Look
have
at that. I
you
mean, what the
guys
fuck?
Any idea what I might be experiencing here? It's
Do
terrifying.
you think maybe
to
like
say
you
the
ought to do
least.
that if you're fucking
I would really like some answers.
like I don't know, maybe just have that happen. If there's a breakthrough happening, have it so it automatically does that and I don't have to do that. No, I'm just
When
raging.
I was 8 or 9, I saw
Getting
something
fucked.
really weird on Christmas Eve. This was many, many years ago now, but
I mean,
I still
sure.
remember it like it was
You don't
yesterday.
have like any supplies through here.
At the time, I still
trying.
believed in Santa Claus, and as a good amount of children do, I had the usual
Good idea. Put
anxiety
that
and
there and then
excitement
just have
for
like
Santa
nothing
to leave
in
Christmas
your own
presents
country.
by the
It's a
tree.
great idea. Winning
I went to
strategy.
bed. I had some trouble going
Okay,
to sleep
that
with
would
holiday
suck.
nerves and such.
That
I'd
would
finally
suck
drifted
bad
off
if
at
we
some
lost
point,
that.
I woke up to the sound of soft footsteps somewhere in my room. I automatically assumed that it was Santa Claus, and I was scared to see him for fear that he might leave or his magic will fail. I opened up one eye just barely, and when I did,
We have air
I
down
saw
here?
this black figure standing over my bed, staring at me.
Yes.
It was tall, probably around 6
Oh.
feet, and it was completely black. It looked almost blacker than black in a way, if that makes sense, and I couldn't see any eyes, or mouth, or nose on it, but I could clearly see the outline of a head,
Counterattack
arms, body,
him.
and legs. It looked
Oh,
like
you
a bigger
scumbag.
person, so thinking that it was Santa just made sense to me at
Old
that time.
Stanislaw.
It stayed in one spot.
Fucking
for maybe
falling
10,
off of
15
mountains,
seconds,
man.
Until it took a few steps
God
closer.
damn.
It sort of leaned a little more and still a few feet away from me, and then stayed there for 10 to 15 seconds more.
Alright,
Even though
well,
I couldn't
that
see
failed.
a face, though, I knew that it was looking right at me. It's just that weird feeling you get when you know that you're being watched or looked
Dude.
at. I closed my eyes again and waited for a few minutes.
Stop.
When I looked back, it was gone.
Did you push me out of there?
I lived in a pretty old
You
house
must
at that time, so the doors and the floorboards were squeaky and loud.
Fine, fine. Fucking pull
I
out.
heard the
Christ.
footsteps, but I never heard the door open, which was
Oh
really
my
weird.
God, we're getting butt
I
fucked.
never did see this figure again.
Under our
I've had some other
fucking
spooky experiences in this house. I
That's
asked
pretty
my mum
frustrating.
if she heard Santa when he came into my room last night, and she sort of looked confused for a second. Then she played along and just assumed that I was lying. I know this wasn't
Maybe he'll run out of
person.
manpower.
I know that it wasn't a dream. I also know that spirits or entities are often attracted to lots of excitement or energy, so Christmas might be a perfect time for a ghost to pass through.
I mean, that's all we
I
got.
don't know, but
That's
it's
it.
definitely a memory that will stick
If
with
that
me
isn't gonna hold,
as long as I live.
nothing will, unfortunately.
When I, a 21-year-old female, was 17, I wanted to au pair, and the only place close to me that I could go to as a 17-year-old was England. So I found this family, a mother with 2 kids, boy and a girl. I messaged them and talked with the mother, and she seemed very interested and very nice.
He lost
So
Krakow,
to
actually,
have a
but
date for me to
then
go
got it back
anywhere
without looking.
was that. When I got to the airport, I was very confused that
And
they
lost
weren't
it
there to
again?
pick me up.
No?
I messaged the mother to ask her where they were and if it would be a long time for them to come and get me.
Well, yeah.
She told me that she was on her way and it was just sort of stuck in traffic or something, and I
fine.
thought, okay, that's fair enough. She told me to go to the exit and wait. Then, not long after, she
This
told
is
me
retarded.
that she was there and that she was in a blue car. I was looking around, very confused, since I couldn't really see any
Stop
blue
attacking.
cars there.
Stop.
When I
Holy
finally found
fuck.
it, some other woman than the one that I had been talking to walked out of the car and towards me.
Look,
The
retard.
instant that
You're on
I
defense.
made eye
Oh
contact
my
with the other
God.
woman, I got a
Very
long
annoying.
text from the woman that I was supposed to work for, where it basically said that her husband had come from the country that he worked in and that they had fought because he didn't want an au pair in the house, and for some reason she didn't want to tell me that, so she just gave me to her good friend who needed an au pair. I was very confused by this, obviously, and by that time a little bit scared too. It all seemed very weird, as if someone was watching me and had been waiting for the right moment to send that text. The woman seemed very friendly, though, but it was hurrying.
pushing me right over
taking
here.
things and putting it in her
4
car and
undersupplied
talking to me.
divisions into
I am
super
a bit
entrenched.
nervous and non-confrontational by nature, so I didn't really know what to do or say other than just follow her and what she was doing. When it was all done, she told me that we should get going, and I told her that I wasn't really comfortable with
Give
it
me
all.
fucking supplies.
She told me that she understood, but that she really needed the help. and
Please.
Also only had 2 children at home. We had to move fast because of the place that she was parked, so we got in the car and started driving out of the airport pickup spot. The second that we started moving, I told her that I was very uncomfortable with this and really wanted to get out and stay at the airport. She seemed a bit upset by this and told me that, sure, she could drop me off, but she had to get out of where we were because she could get a ticket for letting me
Fuck
out
you.
there or something like that.
There you go.
I don't know if that's true or not, but it's just what she told me. We drove for a few minutes, still on the airport grounds, and we stopped a bit away so I could get out and call my parents. I talked to them, pretty much sobbing the whole time, and I noticed that while I was talking to them, the woman was inside her car talking to a woman, the one that I'd been talking to, I presume. I didn't understand the language, so I can't say what they were talking about. But when I was done talking, I got
Oh,
into
that's
the
going
car
well at
again,
least.
and I told her that I really wanted her to let me out. And she kept asking me if I was sure that I didn't want to go into town with her or something, if I didn't want her to drop me off by the shopping centre. I, of course, told her no, that I really want her to just let me out by the airport. And she did, thankfully, and I went inside and talked with my parents.
Don't even look at where we're losing. It's the best strategy.
After this happened,
Just ignore
I
it.
got some really weird voice memos from her and 2 other people. I couldn't understand them, but it was very weird. My parents also tried contacting her, and she blocked them both. If you don't know, a lot of au pairs are being treated very poorly, so For us to feel safe and secure and sure that we don't get cheated out of pay or working
Hit him.
more than we are allowed, but we have to sign a
Berlin,
contract.
baby.
And later on, I found out that the contract that she had sent me was actually fake. And
Why don't you
not
fucking
really
get
binding.
out of
I
Romania
don't know how,
and
but
defend Berlin?
it wasn't legitimate, apparently. Plus, her addresses that she had sent me were also fake. She apparently didn't live at either of them. I found out later on that the city that I was in was a bit of a hotspot for trafficking as well. I didn't know this until after this had happened, but it was just a lot of very sketchy stuff. And of course, I could be overthinking this one, I admit. It might not be as bad as I think it was.
Alright, you
but
cut out the offensive down there, thank
I know
God.
that I was sure that something was going down.
This is my core. Do you realize that? Oh no, it's not. Not Sudetenland.
Well, about 15 years ago, I was living with my ex-girlfriend and my sister and her husband in an old house not far from town. Within the first few weeks of living there, strange things were happening
go.
regularly. Lights going out randomly, noises upstairs. At one point, one of the windows at the back of the house was cut. Like
Women in the
someone went
workforce.
at it with a glass cutter trying to break in, but gave up on it and left. Just really creepy stuff like that. That was bad
This is
enough.
just shit.
but things got pretty severe as time went on.
Just total bullshit.
And one week in particular was just absolutely crazy. The first thing that happened that week was
Turn on Desperate
on
Defense
Tuesday
everywhere.
night. Everyone was working and I was home alone watching TV when I
Give me
noticed our
Berlin.
cat was acting really weird. Backed into a corner and arched up like it was scared. When I went to get up, the electricity went out in the house and it was pitch black inside. And the second that that happened, I heard really loud
We actually
footsteps
stopped
running
that
down the
basically with
stairs
fucking
straight
force
at me.
defense. That's retarded.
I got up and braced myself for whatever it was.
Alright,
but
don't retreat. Oh,
when I
okay.
did, there was nothing.
Yep, sounds right to me.
I stood there for a moment and then eventually gathered myself and went outside to the front garden to check if other houses' lights were on, but my house was the only one that was dark.
Got him.
I went to the fuse box and reset the trip switch and all was back to normal.
Alright, let's get an encirclement.
A few days later, I think it was a Thursday, we were all in the sitting room watching a movie with pizza and lights on and some good atmosphere in the house when, out of nowhere, a massive bang happens upstairs. We go up to check it out, and I went into our bedroom and saw my bedside table was now in the middle of the room. Mind you, this bedside table was really heavy, so there's no way that it could move by itself. But the worst and last thing that happened to me was on a Saturday night, and I will never forget this. It still gives me chills when I even think about it. We go to bed, everything's normal, watch a bit of a movie and fall asleep. I wake up facing the wall and glance at the alarm clock. It read 3:13. I turn over to go back to sleep
Boop.
and I see my ex standing in the middle of the room. Confused, I begin to sit up to ask her what's up, but as I start to sit up, I realize that my ex is actually asleep in the bed next to me. Instantly, a surge of fear runs through me and I'm frozen to the spot. My eyes adjust and I barely make out the figure now, but it's a young girl in a nightdress with a cartoon character on it, soaking wet with her head down looking at the floor. I can even hear the water drop onto the carpet and I'm just sitting there, just completely in shock. Couldn't believe my eyes. After a couple of seconds though, it just kind of melts away, like fades out of sight. I got up and turned on the lights, rubbed my eyes and tried to tell myself that it must have been a night terror or something, but the problem with that was that there was water on the floor, a wet patch where she was standing. It wasn't long after that I moved out. I can still picture her to this day though, and it was the creepiest thing that I've ever experienced.
I mean, the attack
I grew up in a
literally
small
is the
town
best
in Nova
defense in
Scotia,
this patch, at least.
Very rural. And one night, a group of us, 6 or so, were walking around town at night. I would have been about 15, 16 years old at the time, so about maybe 11 or 12 years ago. Now, there's a graveyard there that you have to get by walking down a very long wooded path. It opens up into an open, sort of hilly area with no houses nearby at the end, surrounded by trees. We were all just sort of messing around in the graveyard, doing the usual stuff that we try to spook each other out and see if we can see anything spooky. We'd been there for probably about 45 minutes and got burned out on the spook factor, so we were just gabbing away when my friend Jay pointed out that a light was moving weird in the sky. We looked up and, yeah, a distinct light was moving across the sky.
Well, if you're not going to fucking get surrounded, just give it to me.
It would make like 90-degree turns on a dime. No curving into it or anything. Just bam, right-hand turn. We were sort of debating what it could be too, when all of a sudden it just exploded into a fireball. But there was no sound, which was weird. And when that happened, the whole lighting outside changed just by a little bit. Imagine there was a dimmer outside for starlight. Well, it was as if the entire ambient light changed for like a split second. It wasn't like it lit up from the explosion too, but as soon as that happened, all of us looked at each other and broke into a sprint. We didn't need to say anything, we all just said something that was really weird.
Critically
we ran
under
through the
strength.
graveyard though, and down the long wooded pathway. My friend C and I were at the back of the group.
Give me
slowed to
Lubeck.
walk once we
I'm
started
not
nearing
asking.
the end. Everyone was just talking ahead about what the heck that we just saw. As C and I are talking though, we then hear sticks breaking to our left. Instantly I looked over and say, "What the heck is that?" And there's what looks like a completely naked, sort of thin child or something lurching through the woods.
What the fuck is this
approximately
story?
10 feet from us. But its skin was so white that it almost looked like it was glowing.
A child?
I don't think it was, but it sort of looked
Il
like that.
child.
It was just kind of slowly lurching in our
Across this river.
direction, moving through the sticks.
Come on.
Well,
Leipzig.
we immediately ran, yelling, "There's something in the woods here," but I wanted to be sure because...
Okay, fuck off
I thought
with
that I was
this.
going to regret it if I didn't double check. So I backtracked a little bit just to confirm that I was seeing what I thought I was. And yeah, it was just that. A
Uh-oh.
naked,
What?
pale, sort of humanoid thing
Okay, he's
walking
attacking
slowly through
Vichy?
the woods. We ran
Well,
away
how about we
again
get a
to the end of the
D-Day instead of
pathway,
fucking
and
attacking
only one
new
other friend
countries?
had seen what we saw, but not as close as us. The time between the explosion in the sky and the
bullshit.
thing in the woods was probably no more than like 2 minutes at the most. 4 years ago, though, I messaged my friend that I was walking with that night. We don't really hang out or talk that much anymore, just to see if
Nope,
our
you're not
memories were
supposed to
the
do
same.
that.
And yeah, he confirmed everything. I'm 27 now, and even with my skeptical about
God.
everything sort of attitude, I really just don't know how to explain this one.
A lot of
I'm
Soviet
not
guns.
sure if the thing in the sky was
Not many of
related to
our
the
own.
thing in the woods, but
None of our own in that
I
division.
can only assume so, right? It was a very weird
90.
experience, but another interesting bit of info is that the small area that I grew up in is home to a UFO incident, the Shag Harbor UFO incident. And in the wiki info it states that a pilot was being followed by a craft and it exploded but made no sound, which was very similar to what we saw. Very interesting, for sure. So I was in hospital waiting.
he
for
knows
a
he can't
space
hold
on
this.
Maplewood so I could be induced to have my vape. I was very uncomfortable and was told walking around might help move things in the right direction. Me and my partner decided to walk down to the main foyer of the maternity
I got Leipzig.
hospital and
It's hilarious.
walk around the hospital grounds and stuff.
Hitler is on the back.
It was about 2 in the morning, but it was July, so it was a nice mild evening. As we came out the stairwell to the
Advance!
bottom floor,
Alright.
I had a painful contraction, then had to sit down on the chairs at the door. Me
Is
and
this
my
person
partner
pregnant?
were just sort of
I
chatting
missed
after
this
the
part.
pain subsided, when the automatic doors opened and a very large man
Can we
walked
please retake our fucking...
He looked at us with a really
Polish
crazed look
as
in
fuck
his
city.
eyes, muttered something, then took off down
Truly,
the corridor
this has got to
grunting.
help.
I was thinking,
Stability.
huh, that's
Can we get
odd.
any?
When my boyfriend practically
We could
lifted
ban
me off the
something.
seat and hissed under his breath
That
at me
always
to
makes stuff
move
more stable.
now, and ran with me towards the lift. Bearing in mind, I'm 9 months pregnant
Oh, yeah,
and
she
in
is
the early
pregnant.
stages of labor, so I'm not exactly in shape to move fast anyway. Once I got in the lift, I'm completely bewildered
It's simple.
and asked my boyfriend, what the heck was that about? He then shakily asked me if
Killed a
I
Batman.
saw the 2 massive rocks the man had in his hands. No, I did not. As soon as we got into the
That
ward,
would be good for
we
you, actually,
informed the
'cause
charge nurse, and she
need to
basically locked
entrench.
the entire maternity unit down until the police came to remove this guy. But it turns out that he ran out of the main hospital up the hill after being admitted to having a mental health crisis, I think. I don't know. I'm just so
damn it.
glad that he didn't hurt anyone and didn't hurt us, and that my partner was switched on enough to notice that this guy had some rocks in his hands, because that's pretty terrifying.
Alright, well, let's do a new strategy then.
So my parents divorced when I was 7 years old. I have an older brother who was 9 at the time of the divorce, and my mum got full custody of us, and we would only see our dad every
Please
other week.
take Hamburg. At
My
any
mum was a
cost.
waitress, so she didn't have a steady income, and we struggled a lot. And because of that, we
one,
moved
like,
around
louder?
a lot, because we were constantly
Oh
being...
yeah, it's an old one. Alright, let's do this one. No.
You know, communism has never been tried, or it wasn't
No.
true.
This.
I snapped my head to where he was pointing. It looked like a bare human footprint and a few others leading away from this place. That looks like a footprint and a bare footprint. Who the hell walks around barefooted in these type of areas?
Barefooted.
There was debris everywhere. Rocks,
Alright.
glass, old shards of, like, building materials.
Next plane?
Man, this is so strange. What do we even do?
Or rubber,
I
maybe?
say,
Because we're willing to build
this
rubber if
time,
we're gonna fight
Being
the
where
allies.
my mind was at the time, I seriously didn't know what to do. Who would be around in bare
Cross
feet
this
like
river.
said?
What is what river
There
is
should
this?
have not been anybody doing something like that here. Or better yet, I should have considered the fact that whoever this was, or whatever this was, might return to this spot. Anyway,
Yeah, eat
we
shit,
walk
free
over,
France.
and yep, we find more footprints that look just like the ones from before. Most were even close to our own foot size. Joe and Matt got back sometime around dusk. It was starting to get dark, so we got a fire started, and we backed up our trucks and all lined them up, ready to get the hell out of there if need be. As the fire burns, we begin to drink. Matt and Joe are talking about the pile, like it's some poacher's dump area. Again, the fact that we were still there is absolutely insane. I can't for the life of me tell you why we didn't get out of there. The forest got dark, and I mean dark.
Let's
The moon
consolidate
was
our
out,
gains.
and it
No.
just seemed like it wouldn't
Let's
touch
attack
the
right
city.
here.
We all did only have a few drinks, not enough to get pissed drunk or anything. We didn't get super messed up, and we didn't do any hold my beer moments. JC was
That's gay.
the first to point out that it was silent outside. Not the silence of the woods at night. I mean, it was silent. Like no sound other than us and the fire. No wind, bugs, nothing. Then,
Huh,
just
we got
like
him there.
the scary movies, a glint of movement in the forest caught my eye. What was that? Did you guys see that? Who's that? Joe says, interrupting my sentence. We all look around and stand just outside the light of the fire. We couldn't see much, but what I saw, I could only describe as a half-naked man, with this stupid grin on his face, and this weird stick in his hand.
I mean, I'm sure that if they D-Dayed, he
"Yo,
would have
dude,
nothing.
You okay? Joe yells, and this thing lurches forward a few steps like a
Nothing.
Walking Dead type creature. What the
Like a
hell?
zombie?
Joe
Lol.
tells me, on the other hand, just to
Walking
go into
Dead
the
type
truck and
creature.
get my 1911 from under the seat.
Boomer.
I click the slide as I chamber around. James, what are you? Shut the hell up, JC, and get in your truck. We got to go now. I level my gun, taking aim at this thing.
This is my core.
Seeing Joe to my right, he had gotten his AR-15.
We actually
out
have
of
a
his tent
bonus to attack
as
this
well.
because it's my core.
Says, James, bro, we need to leave. There's 2 more to his left. Now, we look over. We see that these people or these things have these
Hungry is a
antler
great
helmets.
power?
I guess I don't really know how to explain them, nor do I care to. Matt, start my truck, Joe said. He rode there with Joe. Matt was like lightning in that moment, and ran to the truck and turned it on quicker than I've ever seen anything happen. JC, you too, bro. Fire it up. He starts his truck. Now, this man twitches left, right, and like every type
I'm actually
of position you
capitulating
can imagine.
because he took
It
fucking
was like some
Krakow.
Matrix glitch or something. I don't really know how to explain it, and I'm very sorry if I'm not making any sense. Then, I see this thing's eyes. Or the lack of eyes. It was... There was no white, just this golden yellow glint. It was like just a
You guys
source
really
of
not take
light.
that?
Not like it was eyeballs, if that makes any sense. That was all we needed. I hopped in the back of JC's truck, and he took off out of there. I started firing at this thing because it started chasing us. I hear the crack of the AR-15 go off, and 3 rounds go into this guy. But he doesn't stop. He doesn't even trip. He doesn't do anything. He continues to run at us. I shoot a few shots myself, shooting a few 45 ACP hollow point rounds. I'm not sure how many times I hit it, but I know I hit it at least once or twice. We drove around a sharp corner, and just like that, it suddenly disappeared and wasn't following us anymore. We didn't stop until we got to the main town, into much more lighted and populated areas. Our windows were all busted out. It looked like someone had keyed the sides of the car. The hood looked like it got stabbed by a pitchfork. I just brushed it off and tried to just assume that we had been attacked by some weird creep in the woods or something. But after listening to the show and reading stories and hearing tales around my area from natives, I believe that this was a Wendigo or a skinwalker. Maybe that's what it was. If anything, it's definitely not something of this world. If I know one thing, there are things out there that are real, and they are evil at their core. Be safe, friends, and thank you for reading my story. Much love to all in the swamp. This is my true story.
Ridiculous.
When I was a young teenager,
But
I
fine.
used to live in the center of a county called Shropshire, England, in a small farming hamlet, not even marked on the map. This location was idyllic, surrounded by nothing but fields and
Fuck you,
trees.
counterattack
with the
Lubeck.
nearest
Hope you
people
die.
outside of our
Fuck you.
15
Take that
strong
back.
community being our landlord, residing around 2 miles down the road.
Take
Our
this
home
city.
was a barn conversion that had been converted in the 90s, and despite the house being constantly cold, we were happy. Our home was the largest we had rented, for an affordable price. We had always struggled for money. As such, struggling to find a large place enough to accommodate us all. The house had a large living room near the entrance, kitchen to the right, 3 bedrooms upstairs, one of which being my brother's room, having access to a kind of attic space above the garage.
You got
My
plenty of
mother
artillery,
and
so.
my stepfather, at the time, they had a room, and my little sister's room was opposite of my brother's upstairs. My room was the only bedroom downstairs, located at the end of the building, slightly below ground level, with a door that connected to the outside and a window overlooking the woods to the front of the hamlet. The first few months we lived there. We moved in when I was 13. Seemed truly idyllic. I had friends to mess around with in the woods, one of whom was my age, and a girl, although that was only important from an excitable 13-year-old's perspective. Most importantly, though, we had a home and a community that welcomed us. Now, skipping forward a year, we almost did all of the walks and explored everywhere in the woods in this area, and quite often our group would cycle around the farmers' fields and play games. When it snowed, we would often amass large snowball fights between all the children and adults we could rope in. This happened almost every winter we were there, with snowdrifts often laying the sides of the road preventing us from traveling to work or school. Anyways, one day,
Lay 'em out,
in
boys.
about mid to early July 2010, my uncle and his family came to visit. This was the first time we had seen them properly in years, and so we decided to show them the walks we enjoyed in the area and got reacquainted with them. We had decided to go around the large field that ran parallel to our hamlet and continue down into the woodland at the bottom of the hill. While walking and chatting, we started to notice discarded animal carcasses that looked like they had been there for months, scattered all over the edge of the field. My uncle had asked, "Are there usually this many dead animals here?" To which we responded with, "No, actually, we have never seen this before." Now, we used to walk this route regularly,
Fucker.
and my mother would quite often ride her horses around the field, and we had never noticed anything like this before. The carcasses ranged from several calves to multiple deer skeletons and several dead foxes. The crops that were planted were also flattened in strange shapes, which just added to the uneasy vibe. We all started to feel it at the same time. So we took pictures, completed our walk, and went home. After this day is when the fun really started to begin.
This is where the fun begins.
At night, I would often hear the gate open outside, just beyond the door that led outside from my room, and after hearing it approximately 4 or 5 times, I decided to man up and check in case it was someone attempting to break into our property. However, when I would check, the gate would be open, and there would be no sign of the person who opened it. As these events were identical, and they continued to be more and more persistent, I steadily got braver and would venture outside with my flashlight, reacting as fast as possible and looking for any sign of someone or something. After not
Got it.
finding a culprit for around a month, I began to just ignore it. I thought maybe it was just the wind or something, and just shut the gate the following morning. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like this, but your brain does its best to just process what's going on and make an equation.
Pin, pin.
It became a non-factor
Pin.
and continued right up until we left the property in
Damn it.
2013.
Alright, well,
In early 2011, I was struggling with insomnia, partially due to social stress and partially due to my failings at school. This in part made me doubt the next thing that occurred, but I can remember it vividly as one of the most terrifying happenings of my life. It was about 1:30 a.m. on a Friday evening. I was getting ready to go to bed, and so went to the bathroom next to my bedroom to brush my teeth. As I exited the bathroom, I heard what sounded like rapid footsteps heading between my little brother's room and my little sister's room. Now, we had dealt with rats in the past, and I knew the sounds that the central heating pipes can make. These are both known sounds. This, however, sounded like a small child running at full speed from one room to another.
what the fuck?
It piqued my attention. I went
Damn, he's got a
upstairs
lot of
ready
fucking
to
shit
berate
over
my
here.
12-year-old brother for still being awake and active at 1:30 a.m. But to my surprise, my brother and sister were both soundly asleep. So I checked the attic door in my brother's room, just to make sure no one could have been in the house and left to go downstairs. My mind then started to rationalize the situation, and I believe that I had started to overreact. And wow, this will make a funny story in the morning. But then, as I continued down the corridor towards my bedroom, I heard that same, identical noise running from my sister's room to my brother's again. Now, I was scared, not for myself, but thinking that I had missed something that could put my siblings in danger. These did not sound like animal footsteps. These were definite, audibly bipedal steps heading from my sister's room to my brother's. I immediately turned around and ran up the stairs, but they were both asleep yet again. This time, I decided to enter my brother's room and do a quick check of all the cupboards and corners. I looked everywhere that could harbor someone, fearing that if I didn't do something, maybe something bad would happen. After clearing my brother's room and feeling as if it was a safe space, I shut his door and proceeded to make my way down. I was shaken, but happier now that I knew nothing was there. Tap, tap, tap. I hear on his door, and I walk down the stairs. Tap, 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 and again. Tap, tap, tap. It was a rhythmic motion. I was frozen to the spot. I didn't dare turn around. Suddenly, a frantic scurrying noise could be heard going directly behind me, heading from my brother's room back towards my sister's. I ran up the stairs and sat opposite of my sibling's room, crying, "Mom!" outside my parents' door.
I love
I
supply.
stayed there till the sun came up, constantly vigilant, but I hadn't heard anything else for the rest of the night. A few weeks went by, and nothing else happened,
What?
besides
You're being
the bloody
supplied by
gates,
air. How are you
and
not?
I had almost forgotten about the experience
Are you
and
dying?
passed it off as a dream. Just after my 15th birthday, I was watching a film in bed. It was a Tuesday evening, and yet again, I was still up at around 1:30 a.m. due to my insomnia.
Look, we got one, huh?
Anyways, I was about 3/4 of the way through this film when suddenly I had a feeling. Like, it wasn't a feeling I'd experienced before. Just a feeling. It was the feeling of pure dread. However, I just knew to look out of the window.
Pour through, baby.
To my dismay, I saw a bright green orb floating around 100 feet, just out of the tree line. It was getting closer to our house, moving slowly behind the cover of the trees. As I observed it move up and out of sight, the light appeared to be cylindrical and appeared to maintain and increase in altitude. There was no noise and sensible vibrations in the air. It just moved. I couldn't move. Fear overwhelmed me and caused my body to lock up. I couldn't even breathe or blink. All I could
Can't
do was
breathe.
just stare. I watched as it disappeared behind the tree line, and then I caught the slightest glimpse as it went up. Around 5 minutes later, to continue my nightmare, my stepfather came home, opened the door, and went straight upstairs. I peeked around the door, and he was naked at 1:30 a.m. Years went by, and I doubted whether this occurred, or whether it had simply been a result of my poor mindset at the time. But a year later, completely separate from my experience, as I had never discussed it with my stepfather or my mother mentioned it in passing of a story of my stepfather. He was drunk. A story of how he had gotten really drunk on a night in 2011, roughly a year ago, observed 6 or 7 green orbs on his way home, that he believed to be some sort of aliens or something. He saw them at about 11:30 p.m. when he got into the house. After this, I shared my part of the story and explained what I had seen. How the timings didn't quite align, and all the similarities were very similar though. How do you even react to that? How do we even know if we saw the same thing? It's just such a weird encounter. That was my close encounter, though, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Finally, we have some guns on our own side.
Now, to start this off, I'm a 22-year-old dude with loads of energy. So much so, I usually take midnight walks around my house to get ready for bed, and I cannot really sleep before 2 a.m. My parents recently told me that they were going on vacation and needed a house sitter. Being the cheap parents they were, they asked me to watch their cabin in some random forest 30 miles to the nearest town and 3 miles from the nearest neighbor. The cabin is in the middle of nowhere, all alone, with a lakefront view. Who could say no? I told them goodbye and wished them the best of luck on their
Shipe.
trip. I arrived at the cabin the next day. The first day went well, because I thought they didn't have cable or service. I was wrong, they actually did. I fished and swam and ate good food. But the second day is when the nightmare started. The time was
Fucko.
roughly about 1 in the morning, and I couldn't sleep at all. I put on my boots and headed out in the cool night air for a little walk. I walked around the house a couple of times and stood by the edge of the thick forest. When I was about to head back to my bed, I heard footsteps coming from the trees. Now I'm used to deer being everywhere around my house, but the footsteps sounded way heavier than a normal deer. But being the curious chap I am, I threw a rock in the thick bush to see if it would run off or scare whatever that was. Silence. At first, I heard nothing. And then, I heard something that I wish I didn't. Laughing. Not from a normal person, but from someone who was absolutely insane. Then, the same rock I threw was thrown right back at me. I never ran so fast to my truck in all of my life. When I turned on my
Yeah,
car
now
and the
you're getting
headlights
hit by the
came
fucking
on,
railway gun.
I could see a bald
Dick.
man still laughing where I was just a second ago. I sped until I reached the end of our long driveway. I then called the sheriff and had to wait about an hour. When they finally got there, they thought I was just joking, but when they checked where I told them to, they found rope, duct tape, a long knife, and a faint, bloody trail leading to another cabin, some far away into the trees. Inside was just a bunch of scribbles like a child does, and a rag covered in blood. The police looked all around, and even checked our cabin, but he was never found. The next day, my parents canceled the trip and sold the place in less than 2 weeks. I chat with myself wondering whose blood was in that cabin, and what would have happened. if I didn't find the man in the woods. Hello, my name is Nathan, and I live in a small town in northwest Alabama. This story took place about 2 months ago. I was coming back from
Are you
Florence,
from Alabama,
and it
Tennessee,
had
or
just turned dusk on this
Caroline?
county road in rural Lauderdale County. The road that I was on was very close to the Tennessee River, so there was a lot of fog over the road at the time. I always remember growing
Polish
up,
tank
my
industry.
grandmother would tell me the
be
story of
better.
how her uncle and his wife and 3 kids went off the road in their car and drowned in a creek. When I was coming up on this creek, it was very foggy. The creek has a small bridge
Yeah, I'm
over
trying to
it,
cut 'em
and
off.
next to the
We
creek
can
is
cut
a
'em off
newer
in
church with an
Switzerland.
old cemetery. As I was coming back upon the creek, there was an old man who walked out of the woods and onto the street just past the bridge. I had my low beams on and my fog lights on, so I could see through the fog more clearly. As I saw this old man, I immediately pressed the brakes, and I thought it was a real person. The man continued to cross the road. I could notice his attire, though. He had an old straw hat on, and he had a piece of wheat hanging out of his mouth. His shirt was faded. It was a red button-up shirt with patches and tears all over it. His pants were old jeans with patches in them, and he was barefoot. He continued to cross the road, and right at the double yellow line, he turned and winked at me as to say, "Thank you for stopping." There was one strange thing about this incident, though. It was like I could see the fog on the other side of this man. My headlights went right through his body and showed the fog on the other side. As soon as he crossed the road, I pulled up a little further to where he crossed and stopped. There was a 5-foot hill on the side of the road. He walked up on top of this hill, and that's where the old cemetery was located that I mentioned earlier. I pulled up to see if I could see him, and he was nowhere to be seen. There was no way he ran behind the church or hid behind the hill from me in time. There's just no way. This man was easily in his 80s. When I got home, I asked my grandmother about her uncle, and she showed me a picture of him and his family. And right there next to his wife, with a piece of wheat in his mouth, stood the man I saw on that rural county road. Thank you for taking the time to share this story, and possibly putting it in a video. I really enjoyed the show.
Come on, man.
Years ago,
Fuck you. Are you kidding
I'm
me?
old, but let's say mid-90s, I worked as a woodland firefighter in the Army Reserves. I worked as a spotter, basically. I was stationed in a giant fire tower in the middle of a national park. My job was just as it sounds. I would use binoculars and look out for fire, smoke, and other telltale signs. My nearest compadre was 5 miles or so from me. My days consisted of working my shift, taking long walks around the fire tower, being on the lookout for anyone who might be having illegal fires, looking out for wildlife, and staying afoot of bears and wolves. The way our shifts worked back then was 1 week on, 1 week off, so we slept in the towers, cooked our food, etc. There were nearby toilets and showers for us to use. One day, I came across an illegal bear trap. I had several ranger friends, and I safely set off the trap, then picked it up and took it to a ranger station on one of my treks out for food in my Jeep. Poaching is illegal in the park and carried a big fine, even back
Good,
then.
like,
and
good
some jail
job.
time.
Yeah, this is where we want to defend.
But that never stopped the poachers
No.
from trying.
It's not. It's not where we want
I
to
heard
defend. So
rifle
get the
shots
fuck
and
out.
headed back for my tower. We did have a rifle in the tower, to be used in case of emergencies. Just a few months back, a fellow spotter had been mauled to death by a grizzly bear, so each tower had been outfitted with a rifle. I looked with my binoculars, but did not see anything out of the ordinary. I radioed my coworker Ben, an older guy in the adjacent tower. He hadn't heard anything today, but had come across a few traps himself. That night, after dinner of franks and beans and toast, I was writing to my future wife when I heard the rumbling of a truck. Thinking it may be Ben, occasionally he would trek over. We would crack open a soda and chew the fat for a bit. Instead, I saw 4 men with rifles get out of the truck. One looked around and leaned up against the truck while the other 3 grabbed traps and began to set them up. I grabbed the rifle and my lantern and headed down the stairs. I was only 21, A farmer's son from a rural Virginia farming town, and even with the deployment behind me, I was naive. I should have called it in to the Rangers, but instead, I thought I could talk some sense into the 4 dangerous men. I barely got a, "Hey, what are you doing?" out of my mouth before I was roughly shoved by hands and my lantern fell, and I heard a crack. The rifle was kicked away from me, and I felt the breath leave my chest when I was violently kicked in the stomach. I barely had caught my breath when I was grabbed by the 2 other men.
Good
and
job
shoved
losing Kiev.
forward into
Who
the
lost that?
woods.
You're getting fucking
It
fired.
seemed like we walked for miles.
You're
But
scum.
it was probably only about a mile. However, I noticed that there were no sounds
But,
in the forest.
you know, I'm benevolent,
It is
so we
rarely
won't
silent like
remove you
this.
from office, but
Usually it's a cacophony
you're not
of
getting any
sounds,
promotions after this.
even at night. Owls, wolves, crickets, but on this night, there was nothing. Suddenly, I was shoved onto my knees and I felt hot tears well up. I thought of my parents, my little sister, my brother, my fiancé. They were all back home in Virginia waiting on me. I heard the rack of a gun, and I shut my eyes and
We didn't
prayed.
take a single town over
Suddenly,
here.
the night erupted. However, it was the sound of sirens, those of forest rangers, and behind them in his pickup, Ben, who had tried
Despite
to radio
marching
me that he
into
had heard a
fucking
car's
places
engine,
without
he
anyone
came to my
defending.
tower when I didn't reply. The poachers were arrested. Ben drove me back to the tower. I was still shaking. He didn't lay into me until later. He honestly knew in the moment that I was too shaken up. He wanted me to take a job closer to home, but I never ran into any poachers during the rest of my time. I kept in contact with Ben for a while, sent him a wedding invite and then a photo of my firstborn son in 1997. However, as time usually does, we lost track of one another, and a few years back I Googled him. He would have been 75 or so to discover he passed away a few years back. I don't know whatever came of those poachers.
I'll take it.
In my younger days, just after high school, I was what most would consider a vagrant.
Really?
No home to speak of,
Oh,
but not quite homeless either.
probably because it's not all
Growing
fucking
up
coming
poor
through
in
that.
a poor, dying
ever.
factory town, I sure was few things. But most of the kids in my town knew and understood clearly that the only way to escape such a bleak place was to leave, find work somewhere else, and don't come back unless you want to be trapped forever. And I was no exception to this understanding. It was the result of this desperate retreat from certain poverty that led me to work as a laborer in the pipeline industry. Grueling work, but decent pay. A fair start for one such as myself. After about 3
I
months
think that's
of working,
bullshit,
my
but-
foreman, who we will call Jay, discovered I was staying at a motel and would not have it. He was kind enough to invite me to stay with his family until I found an apartment, and I was grateful for his offer. Jay and his family were honest rural people who lived in an honest rural area. A house with a barn and a field surrounded by wooded hills. No neighbors and one road in and out. Very similar to the houses I had seen and been around growing up. It was a great area and great company, and I was thankful for such a turn in my luck. The first evening I stayed there, Jay's wife got me situated in my room, and I got acquainted with everyone in the house over dinner. After our meal, I stepped outside for a cigarette and decided the tree line behind their barn would be the best area to smoke privately and inoffensively. The sun had set, and by the time I had stepped out of the house, the moon was high and full, keeping the valley I was in dully illuminated and casting the surrounding hills as dark shadows against the star-filled sky. A night that I think most would find peaceful, but as soon as my boots met the grass, that primal instinctive warning that a man gets sometimes began to slowly creep into my core. That alarm that tells you something is not right here. Being young and dumb and brave, of course, I shrugged it off and continued to the tree line, attempting to keep the growing feeling at bay. When I, at last, approached the shadowed tangle of trees and underbrush on the outskirts of their yard, I
There's a
reached into
D-Day.
my pocket,
Thank God.
pulled out my pack of Marlboros, my matches, and struck it alight. As I brought the match to my cigarette, I saw it. Mere feet away from where I was standing, just barely within the trees, was the stark and outstanding silhouette of something very large. It stood crouched and still had to be at least 7 feet tall, large, pointed ears, and a narrowly elongated snout. Its eyes glimmered, This was a weird infrared color you would see when animals reflect their eyes at night. Oh my god. Oh my god, there's a wolf. That's a wolf. Were my initial panic-stricken thoughts. It was during this processing that I realized there was no way this was a wolf, because wolves don't stand upright, and this creature was unmistakably on two legs.
Nazis
It
owned.
was slouched low.
With
One arm
facts.
hung down, past its haunches, and the other was pressed firmly against the tree to the right of it. Broad shoulders, a savage posture. It didn't move. It didn't
Please
seem
surrender.
startled or threatened
Who
or
is
afraid,
this?
but simply aware.
Come on.
It knew I saw it,
Edward
and
Hell.
it knew that I knew. I wish I could say
We'll
I
set
did
you up
something.
right.
Anything. I wish I could
You
say
surrender.
that I ran, or that I screamed, or I even moved. But I was truly frozen in fear, stuck in that spot, standing rigid as a statue with nothing but a quickly dying matchlight between me and whatever monstrous thing was in front of me. We locked gazes for what felt like hours, but was probably only just a moment. And as though the creature had decided it was done terrifying me, it straightened up, backed away slowly into the darkness of trees, and just dissipated. No sound, not a broken twig or rustled leaf to be heard. As soon as my legs allowed me, I ran like hell back to the safety of Jay's house, slammed the door behind me, and was met with a look of concern from my foreman and his wife, who were watching TV in the living room. There's something out there.
Saw some crazy
It was
shit
the only
out
thing I could
there.
gasp out. Jay exchanged a glance with his wife and looked back towards me. Boy, if you're gonna
Yep.
stay here, you need to
There's some
understand
shit
that there
out
are things
there.
out in the woods that you best pay no attention
Yep.
to.
Don't you
He
look
said
at
it
him.
so nonchalantly, like he was talking about last
Boy.
night's football game. You hear a strange noise, you ignore it. You see a strange shadow, you ignore it. And if you get a strange feeling, you come inside and forget you felt it. There are things out there we just don't understand, but we have to respect it
Come on,
because
boys.
it's their land,
Come on back.
and we just live here. It's been 15 years since my encounter with that creature in the woods, and I still think about it all the time.
Come on back.
And
You
though
bite.
I stayed with
Yep,
Jay and his
go on
family
down
for
there.
another 3 weeks after that, I never felt uneasy on his property again. That feeling, it never truly left. But the warning, it was very clear. I will never go out to the woods at night unless I absolutely have no other choice. Once you know what's out there, you never see things the same again. I know this might seem far-fetched, and I know that many won't believe what I'm saying.
Come on back.
The
You get
story
paid.
is
Yeah.
one that is true, and one that I just had to share with the show. Thanks for listening to these creepy and allegedly true horror stories from the deep woods, sent in by viewers just like you. As always, if you enjoyed these stories, please be sure to hit that like button. The more likes this episode gets, the more YouTube promotes it, and that's incredibly helpful to the swamp. If you're new to the swamp, well, why not join us? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to never miss a new episode. I upload them. Camping horror stories. Hey, Swamp Dwellers.
What?
Thanks for your time.
What?
I've listened to many of your
When?
and I've never posted a story before. Anyway, during the early days of the pandemic,
When?
a couple of friends and I went camping outside of Lakeview.
Why does Japan always
I'll take a
attack
second to
me
describe everyone
in
present.
every single game as Russia?
Jackie was my best friend, and we will call him Marvin. Marvin is 24
Whatever.
and isn't
Have fun
easy
with
to
that, I
scare or
guess.
shake up, and he knows quite a bit about the wilderness and survival. The other friend is our resident wannabe outdoorsman, and we'll call him Dave. He's 22. He likes to act like he's a big boss when it comes to anything and everything outdoors. A good guy all the same. We brought Marvin's dog along as well, and she's just about the best doggo. We'll call her Storm. And then, there's me. My name is Tony, and I'm 20.
Hey, Tony.
I don't get out much and honestly keep to myself. I'm a homebody for sure. Alright, with everyone introduced and all that out of the way, let's get into the story. We hadn't planned a single thing for the trip, and it was 100% spontaneous. We got the idea and literally left that same day.
So Japan's just
We
invading
hit
me for no
Storm
reason,
Town,
basically?
Got some hot dogs and water, and then took off.
No fucking
The
reason.
trip took a few hours, and we joked about cannibals and woodland monsters trying to scare each other. You know, regular guy stuff. Finally, we turned off into a busted-up dirt road. It looked pretty bad, honestly, like it hadn't been driven on in a very long time. It was a few minutes outside of Lakeview, and we drove up into the mountains.
Wow,
Mind
that's
you,
pretty good.
all of this took place in March, so there was still snow on the hills. The snow got deep about 5 minutes into our off-road adventure, and we stopped the truck and decided to hike up a bit further to see if we could find a good spot to camp. We had planned to camp out for a week, so we each had a relatively large pack full of stuff that we would need to survive. As we hiked, we found this pre-built camp area. Not a government site by any means. It probably was just a few guys just like us, messing around in the woods. The cannibal jokes came back up. There was a lovely log swing hung up in a tree, a fire pit, and a spot that we could keep our firewood in and it would be dry, and what looked like a big tanning rack, all next to this beautiful stream. Over the next couple of hours, we got everything set up and got a fire started. We cooked up some hot dogs and messed around, threw our hatchets into logs, peed in the stream, all that good stuff. We walked across a small handmade log bridge to the other side of the creek, and I felt off. It was nothing crazy, but just a feeling in the back of my mind. I didn't bother voicing it because it couldn't have been anything. This was before I started listening to horror stories about the woods. We gathered more firewood and went back to the camp, and talked until the sun went down. I forgot to mention that periodically throughout the day, the dog would stop and stare off into the woods in the direction of the truck. She'd stop dead in her tracks, like she saw something, and then just as fast, she'd go back to normal like nothing ever happened. The sun had set, and it got cold. Heavy emphasis on cold. It got so dark that we could barely see each other. Visibility was at an absolute minimum. We sat quietly listening to the fire crackle until Storm did her thing and
There you go.
staring off into the woods behind us. We were facing away from the truck, and we all looked at each other, then pointed our lights toward the woods. We didn't see anything, but this continued happening for about an hour.
Alright,
And then
so
suddenly,
Japan is just
Storm decided she was going to take off toward whatever she was looking
it's
for.
so dumb.
The boys and I were frantically trying to get her to come back to camp.
Japan just goes to war with
We
every
whispered
single
yelled for a
fucking
bit,
ally.
and she did end up coming back.
Maybe I
eventually.
accepted an allied call to arms.
We all decided that it was high time to try and get some sleep.
No,
So
it's
we
not
packed
possible
into
because
the
I'm
tent.
not in the allies.
It was a small tent and freezing. Early spring and we're right next to a stream. It was a pure bro, I'm trusting you not to poke me kind of deal. This is where things get strange. We all rearranged, so Marvin was facing away from me on my right, and Dave was facing away on my left. I was lying on my stomach with my hands over my face to keep some heat in my face. We didn't have sleeping bags, just some blankets. We didn't expect it to be that cold. As I'm just about to fall asleep, the woods suddenly go dead quiet, and it's like someone turned a flashlight on directly
I'm
in
not
front
sure
of my
what's up
eyes,
with like the
because I'm lying down with my hands over my
clusterfuck that
face.
goes on right here.
I threw my head up and opened my eyes to complete darkness. I sat there in astonishment for a couple of seconds, looking around. I tapped Marvin's shoulder, sounding like he was wide awake and unnerved. He asked me, Did you see it too? I'm in shock at this point. I look over and Dave is sitting up saying, So we all saw it? We sat there for a good 10 minutes before deciding we wouldn't be sleeping much for the rest of the night. It was only about 11 p.m. We slept in shifts. 2 of us would stay up to keep the fire going, and 1 of us would sleep on the cot in the tent. It was very uncomfortable. It was such a weird experience. We left as soon as the sun came up, and I haven't been back since. I don't know how to explain what happened, but we just call it the hypothermia dream. And we all talk about it from time to time. This might not be the most terrifying thing that's ever happened to anybody, but it was so strange that it's just left me feeling uncomfortable and kind of scared. If anybody knows what this could have been, definitely let me know in the comments. Good evening, Swamp Dweller. I've been listening for about 6 months, and I dig the skinwalker, hiking, and camping stories the best. Seriously crossing every appendage in hopes that skinwalkers aren't as accurate as any of the other crazy things they say aren't real, but I know they are. But that's not what the story I'm writing to you about today is all about. I've been able to
Can't
see
fucking punch
and
across.
interact with spirits since I was in
There,
kindergarten.
really?
It's my earliest memory. So I've
That
always
hard?
been open-minded about cryptids and the paranormal. But I'm also very much a skeptic. If there's any chance it's explainable, I toss it. I want you to know where I stand on the evidence end of things. People will never take it seriously if we don't put in the legwork, right? All of that said, here's a quick overview of myself. I'm 41 years old and born and raised in Kootenai and Shoshone counties. I'm neither a hunter nor a sportsman, but I grew up walking and camping throughout the Pacific Northwest, alone from Montana to Washington and Oregon. Idaho is the home state. I'm incredibly familiar with the sounds of the woods, and I can identify prints and berries, mushrooms, and poisonous plants. I could sleep alone in the woods with no problem, until this experience. I believe the only things that could have harmed me back then were like animals and people. Therefore, I never saw the experience that I had coming. But my story doesn't take place in my home region, actually. It was sometime around mid-September 2012. I had just spent the summer working as a chef at the Rising Sun Lodge in
We
Glacier
can
Park,
just fucking
Montana.
take Vienna.
I had reconnected with nature.
He will die.
And when the job was done, the last thing I wanted to do was go back home and get a job and get all wound up in life again. I was single for the first time in 10 years, and this new freedom was intoxicating. I wanted to do something crazy.
Fuck off.
So,
Another
I went
victory for
hitchhiking.
the Emperor.
My
Durr,
mom,
you
my
know,
dad,
like durr.
My bear mace, my Jeep knife
It's
for
retarded.
protection.
So
I started
fucking
in
stupid.
Missoula, Montana.
Should never
and
happen.
went all the way to Tennessee and Missouri border, where I was robbed at gunpoint, and I turned around. I'll send that story for a different
Japan
topic.
just declares war on every single
That
person
happened
and then
2 days
loses
after my experience
in every
and
single
2
game.
days before the next adventure. I crossed 7 states in 2 weeks and had done a lot
Like,
of
why
sleeping
did he
alone
attack
in the
me?
woods along
I'm
the
not even
way.
communist.
I slept
I'm
in a
fucking
railroad car,
monarchist.
even slept in the middle of a legit mountain ghost town. That's a feat for someone with my abilities. The point being, I'd grown accustomed to the sounds you experience when you're alone in the woods camping. I had just left a longtime friend's home in Mountain View, Missouri, after visiting several days. I was heading east to Poplar Bluff on I-60. The last ride of the afternoon dropped me off about 10 to 20 miles west of there. The garbage truck I was riding with had to turn, so I had to get
He's
out.
barely even advancing
Thanked him
too,
and
which
smiled
is
as
the
he drove
dumbest
away.
fucking thing.
I met some incredible people hitchhiking, and in
He was
60
the-
seconds, I was all alone again. I was still a way out, but decided I would still chill a bit on this steep, high grassy hill right against the tree line to the Mark Twain National Forest.
We
I
gotta
climbed to
take
the top,
Vienna.
grunting and swearing the entire way up. My house weighed about 45 pounds, maybe a bit more, and hills were my sworn enemy. I reached the top and tossed my pack down. It was a nice flat spot, green
Idea.
still, right next to the tree line, so it was impossible to spot, but I had a great view. I pulled out my rocket and cooked my meal. So I sat against a huge log with a picture of the treetops north of me and an old
Have fun with that, I
billboard
guess.
from Jellystone Park campgrounds. I watched chicken hawks in the blue sky, hunting on the wind for an hour, and decided just to stay there for the night. It was just me and the
for fuck's
natural
sakes,
sounds
man.
of the location for about 10 hours before the experience. I was comfortable with it all. It was almost
Walk.
midnight. I'm lying there in my little 2-person tent that has a zipper on the top so you can just unzip it and step out or look at the stars at night. My cover was on. I read Dean Koontz' Odd Thomas with my earbuds in and a dim headlamp. I always have earbuds on when I get settled in at night, because even squirrels can sound like
The
beasties in the nighttime.
Fuck.
I almost wish I
No
hadn't,
paratroopers
might
in
have
the
heard it
command
first.
group?
but then again, I doubt that it would have really made a difference.
What is a command
Shit.
group?
Reading, and out of nowhere, this long call of a mix of a maybe howl and a moan, with an elk-like call underneath it.
Okay.
All these sounds
Really?
in one. It was like a 20 to 25 second yell. I swore I could feel the bass behind it, on the ground and in my bones.
Why am I defending the
And then
Netherlands?
silence. I flipped everything off quickly, found my knife and mace, and slipped out of my bag without rustling the tent sides. And I waited. The complete silence was torture on my nerves. Then, an eternity, or maybe just 2 or 3 minutes after the first call, it howled again. It was so incredibly loud.
Like,
And I for sure felt it
obviously,
in my
I don't want to
bones.
make a new one of
It was
these.
almost paralyzing, reverberating. After about 20 seconds of it, it stopped again. At this point, I was completely terrified, and nobody, I mean nobody, has any idea where I am. This spot was somewhere, I'm confident, saying nobody ever goes to or comes across. It would be a long time before anybody saw my tent. Was I close enough to anything or anyone to get help if I was injured or had to run? The call broke the silence in my attention, and again, I could feel it inside in the ground. This call was a little longer, and the tone sounded more aggressive, getting louder towards the end, and then complete silence. I can't tell you why, but I wanted to throw up. I tried to run. I wanted to know what the hell that is. The only animal they have here that we don't have back home are wild hogs, and this was no wild hog. It was not an elk, or deer, or a human. It definitely wasn't a bear. It wasn't any nature of the large cat. It wasn't an artificial sound either. My location assured that.
Hitler, I'm glad you
Again,
just left like half of
it
your fucking
called
army.
out, maybe a little shorter in length
And
this
the
time.
retarded allies
I can
can't
tell
even
it came
fucking
from
land in
inside
anything
the
better than the
tree line.
Netherlands.
It was about 10 feet from my tent. It sounds like it's within 100 feet of me. It sounds enormous. This pattern of calls
got a small
and then
landing
few
there.
minutes of silence went on for about 15 minutes or so. The wind kicked up a little, and then I saw something poke the side of the tent, by my head.
How?
It started yelping, just as a fraction of a second before I caught it. The call echoed out again, later than the calls before, and then silence. I laid there in silence until dawn.
Because he's not.
The sounds of the night never came back, and I never heard anything move away from the spot at night, which makes me think that it never actually left. I slept a few hours when the sun came up, and I packed everything and left. I stayed as quiet as I could, head on a swivel as I broke down camp. I camped inside city limits for the next 3 nights, places where I was hidden in plain sight. I had a knack for finding these spots. 2 days after that night, I got robbed, and I turned around to hitchhike home. 2 days later, I was riding west out of Poplar Bluff and decided I needed to prove that it was an animal. This time, several people knew where I was going that night. If it were an animal or a person, I would not hear the calls tonight, that's for sure, right? I knew now, from Google Maps, there was nothing for several miles. No trails, no roads, no homes, absolutely nothing. I relaxed, sort of, and enjoyed the quiet autumn afternoon, with the birds, squirrels, and all the critters at home. I was confident it would be a quiet night, too. I left my earbuds off, but still sat up and read. I was trying to repeat the circumstances. All night it was a symphony of insects and small critters, running and chirping about. An occasional breeze would rustle through the bright September foliage, or a small stick would break. Still, the symphony would just carry on, uninterrupted. As it got to the 10 o'clock hour, I took a single shot of whiskey and smoked a small bowl to soothe my nerves. I'd been smoking for about 15 years, so no bowl I had ever smoked produces the result described in this story. You can check that possibility at the door. I became engrossed in the book, and the white noise created by the forest around me really helped me focus. I'd been reading for about 2 hours when I noticed the noise had ceased. Nothing was moving.
Takuheki
It
Banzai!
had been silent, but it couldn't have been that long. I slowly put my book down and killed my light. Just the sound of the occasional wind. I wasn't in my bag. I stayed dressed, knife and mace on my belt, safety tab off. I also had my emergency beacon in my deepest pocket to be found if something happened. I draped the cover on top, but didn't tie it down. I left a small slit facing the tree line. I also had the overhead mesh unzipped. I was as ready as anyone could be in my circumstances. I'd have to decide now to flee or fight. But I had no real plan for either. I wanted to believe I didn't need them because I wasn't going to have to deal with anything. I sat in silence for about 30 minutes when I heard something pushing through the forest. It would take a few steps, stop for a few moments, and then take a few more steps. I could hear small, dead branches breaking off and sounds of greens being pulled on, sometimes snapping. It went on for about 20 minutes. A few steps, stop. Then they stopped entirely. I couldn't be sure how far away it was when it stopped, until the call came, slicing through the silence, and it was loud. I immediately felt like barfing as the sound hit me. Terrified, I did my best to ignore it. I sat still waiting. The minutes of silence in between were worse than hearing the calls. Each moment shaved 10 years off my lifespan. Every 3 to 5 minutes it would call again, louder, longer, and closer. Eventually it was no more than 50 feet away. How were these calls affecting me at such a distance? It would have had to be easily 40 feet into the thick forest. I was poised for a fight, and I knew the small trail down the road was about 10 feet behind me. But it was steep, and it would be dangerous to navigate in the dark. and anyone who has ever met me can testify to my excessive clumsiness. I would bite it, and the creature would catch me anyway, but I'd head dive off the cliff to avoid being eaten by anything. It calls again. This time, a little bit different. I'm on my feet now, crouched, not being settled with my head against the flap. It calls again. This time it has 4 calls. It's closer, but I couldn't make out anything in the dark. I was afraid to turn on my spotlight, and I honestly didn't know if I was ready to see whatever was calling. 10 minutes pass, in silence. I closed my eyes, still poised to jump and run. I just needed to give my eyes a break from the strain. I listened. 15 minutes now. Nothing is moving. 20 minutes. I exhale a little, my mind is racing over the experience, noting details, and then it called again. It startled me and I screamed. I stood up, kicked on the light, and yelled as loud as I could. Who the hell is out there? Then it answered me. I could see nothing in the trees, but I was met immediately with an angrier, louder, closer call. It was like lying flat, arms and legs spread out with 2 or 3 of those heavy-weighted blankets on you. The feeling only lasted a few seconds, but the physical effect lingered for a few minutes. Like when you are falling asleep and you jerk or cringe awake, how your body tenses hard and then slowly fades to nothing. But over a few minutes instead of seconds, when that call stopped, I could hear something crashing through the thick forest, through dense undergrowth, away from me. After minutes, I could no longer listen to whatever it was anymore. Again, it went eerily silent, and after 10 minutes of silence, the forest started to move again. The symphony returned, and I somewhat relaxed, as much as you could. I've never been so relieved to hear bugs and critters in my life. They played through till the morning, and I fell asleep around 2 a.m., confident that I was safe. The sun rises on another beautiful day, and I break down camp around 10 a.m. But I was curious. I wanted to look for footprints or clues as to what the heck was out there, where it was standing, and calling out to me last night. I left my pack against a tree, covered by tall grass, and had protection on my belt, a compass, and a flagger's tape. I had water and a snack as well. More curious than confident, I walked into the forest. Every 10 feet I tied a bright pink
You
flag
should
to a
fucking
branch
die and
or a
choke on
tree,
shit, please.
so that I could find my way out. Finally, I found the place I believed it had been standing. The relatively small area of matted down, dying
You
foliage stood
are
out
a
in
cunt
contrast to the thick
of the highest
undergrowth,
level.
brittle branches exposed by changing seasons, thorns scattered throughout. The space was only about 5 feet wide, but it was seemingly at the end of what
Fuck
looked
you,
like
man.
a fresher game trail. I checked for hairs or tufts of fur, and didn't find anything identifiable. Probably because I didn't know anything about coats and skin at the time. The leaves had covered a lot of ground, but it was still early, and the bed was still wet from the night before. I hoped I'd find a fresh print. I took a few steps looking down the trail. I noticed almost all the branches up to about 8 to 9 feet high were broken off, or barely hanging on. It was easy to tell that they'd been broken off in one direction, away from me. Whatever it was had arrived quietly and then left in a rush, which is what it sounded like the night before. I began to follow it, and I kept seeing the outline of a print more significant than a deer. I understand these details aren't too comprehensive. There were flat features that stood out from the debris on the trail. I followed this path for about a mile, and then the broken limbs continued
not
until
high
it
enough.
opened to a small field of matted grass. Deer had definitely been bedding there. I crossed the small field of about 80 feet in width, finding the trail coming from the opposite direction. I continued, studying the wet earth for signs, and several different deer were coming and going. I turned and crossed the field, following the deer tracks. Then I see something that didn't match. I stared in disbelief. There were toes, and the ball of the foot stood out, opposite of a well-rounded heel. It was big. I'm a size 11, and this was easily 6 inches longer than mine, and probably 3 inches wider on each side. All the smaller toes of the print were pushed outwards.
How
Our feet
is
don't
their
do
air
that.
still superior?
We wear shoes. I studied the ground it was
Still
following.
has a bigger air
It
force
was
than
headed
me.
towards my camp. After a few minutes of knowing what to search for,
Luftwaffe
I found
fucking
2 more
overpowered.
leaving the clearing towards my base. One more away from the field, and I found a couple more partial ones. Then I saw an almost full one, leading away from my center. Then another. The tracks on the other side went one way. These tracks went both ways.
Good job,
Did this
UK.
mean it was still here with me?
Pointlessly declare war on the Middle
It was
East.
quiet. I hadn't noted any sound since I had left the field. I scanned around me. Slowly, for several minutes, everything was lightly swaying from the cold wind coming through. There was a dark outline on the edge of my peripheral vision that was reeling, out of sync with everything else. The wind died down, the trees stopped moving, but this silhouette kept swaying. And that smell hit me suddenly. In July, I once heard a commercial about outdoor trash compactors. I worked at a bar/restaurant, burst a trash bag out from the kitchen once, and it smelled just like this. You never forget that smell. This was a little worse, though. I dry-retched, holding in my breath. I covered my mouth and nose. Sunlight hit its face and body for just a second, and its eyes reflected gold. Its eyes looked oddly human. The area around the face was very dark brown. Parts of the body reflected coarse, auburn-colored hair. Everywhere I could see, the body had hair besides the eyes. It was easily 8 feet. Its shoulders were a few feet wider than my own. We stayed locked for several minutes. I had to run. I was fighting it. No way I could outrun this thing.
What?
I was skeptical
What?
my knife or bear mace would do anything more than annoy it. I was alive at its discretion from here on out. The wind kicked up, startling me as a pine cone fell near me to my left, causing me to look away for just a split second. I looked
The
back
USA
and it was
must
gone.
be giving me tons. Yeah, they're giving me
I wouldn't
tons
have
of
heard
guns.
anything walking away from this wind.
And planes.
I decided that this was insane. I made a terrible decision, and showed that I hadn't learned a damn thing from all these horror monster in the woods stories or movies ever. I need to go. I start walking briskly. My pack was undisturbed, and I got down the road pretty quickly. I was picked up quickly and was home 2 weeks later. It changed what I could view as possible. I'm still a skeptic of cryptids. I still need evidence of plausible existence. Word of mouth won't be enough. But Bigfoot, bet your ass they're real. Because this wasn't the last time I would lock eyes with one. After all, I live in the Pacific Northwest.
Nigga done saw Bigfoot. You bet your ass
To
I believe
understand
in
my
Bigfoot.
story, you sort of must know a tiny bit about trespassing laws in our country. And that we don't really have any, so long you're respectful and non-destructive. You can walk over any
Okay.
haze you'd like and, in my case, camp on any beach of your choosing, so long as you leave the area how you found it. I used to love camping when I was younger. Our family would go multiple times a year with large groups of my parents' friends and their kids. On average, there were maybe 10 of us at a time, which was a bit of a logistical challenge since we always headed out to the more remote beaches on the coast. We weren't the only ones. There were always yachts bobbing just off the shoreline, with people on them and other campers lining up and down the beach. Most of them also had children or teenagers, so it wasn't a wild party scene. It was very much an informal family holiday spot. There was even a small building with toilets and showers installed nearby, even though this was the middle of nowhere. I guess the local council must have figured that it would help get people out of peeing in the bushes and stuff like that. We took a trip up in spring 2011.
Pee in your bushes.
I'm bad with time, but I know this because I got my dog in the winter of 2010. After picking her out that November from the shelter as a birthday gift
Allies
from
are
me to
incompetent.
myself, as I paid her adoption fee, I know you all love dogs in the swamp, and she will be very important to the story later. So let me tell you a little bit about Parmesan. Parmesan came to me as a 6-month-old puppy who had been rescued from a dogfighting situation. We're not entirely sure what breed she is exactly, but my best guess is that she is a lurcher/staffy. She is a wonderfully well-tempered dog with people and most other dogs, but you absolutely do not threaten her. She'll have you. So, by the time of this camping trip, I had Parmesan for a few months. She'd never come camping with us before, but far as my family are concerned, dogs definitely
Hitler
can go on
has
camping trips.
200
So when we all
infantry
piled into
divisions
the car, she
with
came
60
too.
factories.
Unusually, though, none of my family
How?
friends could make it. So it was only me, my sister, my dad, and my mom.
And why?
I didn't mind, though. I wasn't that attached to the other kids. I'd rather play with my dog, and I'd still have my sister. The drive took the best part of 6 hours, and because we had left a bit later, although I don't really remember why we left later than normal, we arrived at sunset. Not a good time to be building a tent when we'd be expected to arrive to other campers already set up on the beach, illuminated by campfires. The beach was empty, though. Despite this, my parents started taking stuff out of the car and trying to build a tent. They asked us to fetch some of the lighter bags from the boot of the car, while they sat, pointing a flashlight at the sand to see properly. I rolled down the window of the car for Parmesan before getting out. It was hot for that time of year, and I wanted her to have air. Always got to be looking out for my furry little homie. As we're fumbling out in the dark on a beach in the middle of nowhere, it feels spooky. The one road that led to this beach was circular and had a bridge over the water, meaning you could basically circle around the beach like a big O shape if you felt like it. I wasn't really paying any attention to the road. I was complaining that I was tired, as kids normally do, but my mom was paying attention. After maybe 15 minutes of my dad trying to nail a tent into the sand, my mom begins asking him if he had seen that car drive around. It's been a few times. My dad kind of shrugged her off. He's sort of like that, nonchalant.
The Allies just like landed here and then fucked off.
I cannot recall
Yeah,
if
they
he said
totally
anything
did.
of significance back to her.
'Cause like there's no Allied
For a few
divisions
more
there.
minutes, and the car pulled up next to ours on the road, and someone got out. It was maybe 15 or 20 feet away from the cars to where we were, and the light was rather low. Except for the torches we had, we weren't expecting to see anyone else out there at this point, and I think my mom said it must have been security or something. I don't know why a random beach would have security, though. I think she meant that this might be wildlife trust or something, as they do occasionally come down if there is a lot of noise going on. The guy was walking unevenly. He must have been drunk or high because he had that stagger to him. There was absolutely no way this guy was sober. Cool. A junkie. I guess that's not unusual to find, but it's rare to see them in the wild. As he walked into flashlight range, we realized he was carrying a large knife. This thing had to be like 15 inches. I don't know if that's even a thing for knives. Although, I was small at the time, so maybe my sense of scale was off. I don't like my dad, but credit to him, once he saw this, he got up immediately, holding onto the camping mallet, and put us behind him. The man began to shout wildly at us, that we
Bitch
can't camp
doesn't
here,
like her dad.
and he was just letting us know.
Big
My
surprise.
dad tried to initially be a bit low-key with the guy and told him that was fine.
Can I
We
have some
leave,
air,
This
please?
didn't work. He kept coming closer to us. So my dad started shouting, and
Just
the man
totally
kept shouting
scuffed.
back. My sister and I
No
began
air.
to cry. I remember shaking as I was utterly terrified, as I'm sure anyone would be in this situation. It really did seem like this guy and my dad were going to fight. I'm going to be honest. I didn't really fancy my dad's chances. While it's grim to consider, I'm absolutely convinced that he would have killed my dad, and possibly all of us as well once he was done. I don't think my mother would have had the common sense to run with us. I love her, but she's always put my dad and her relationship with him above us. This isn't how it went down, though. It
This
was
guy is, like,
a
retarded,
bolt of light on the
coping.
back of us, like a wolf descending on its prey, took us all by surprise. Most of all, the man with the knife. In that moment, Parmesan was the apex predator. Large canines represent nature. She got him good by the arm and clamped down hard, ripping his jacket and shredding the skin underneath. He dropped his knife as it had been in the arm. She had got him by. He kicked her, he punched her, and eventually she got off. He grabbed the knife from the sand and ran back to his car and drove off. Parmesan didn't follow him. She stayed with us, muzzle covered in blood. Quickly, as we gathered our things and all got back in the car, all pretty shook up by the incident, I looked Parmesan over. She was okay, but the car's window was much more open than I'd left it. I think what happened was, when the shouting started, she must have got her paws up on the gap and pushed it down. As it's an old car, it had the manual windows and not the electric ones. We think she must have been able to hit her paws and force it down enough to squeeze out. This is not the end of my story, though. We were all scared, and since we had the dog with us, we couldn't book
Can I
it
like
to the hotel.
a
for
Fortress
the night.
Buster or something?
My parents decided just to drive home so we could
Oh,
all
I
feel
mean,
safe. But first had
Why
to
is there a
drive into
fucking
the
fort
nearest
there?
town for
Is it
petrol,
Satanland?
as they were kind of low. I spent the
To
time
fucking
trying to clean
punch through the
Parmesan up a
Alps? I
little.
mean, this is just
I
cancer.
always loved dogs, but what she had just done for me blew my mind. As we drove into town, we came across a petrol station, but it looked closed. My dad drove up closer to get a better look, and stuck his head out the window to get a better look at the sign. My mom asked him what on earth he was doing, and he told her he was trying to see when it opens. And he replies, "Never. Apparently it's closed forever." My heart sank. Parked in the corner behind a van, so we hadn't seen him at first, was the man with the knife.
Yup.
He was sitting on the front of his car using some tissue paper to clean up his arm. It looked bad. Without stopping to refuel,